Hello and welcome to episode 173 of the Crate and Crowbar. It is the 24th of January 2017. My name is Chris Thurston and tonight I'm joined by Philippa War.
Hello.
And Tom Senior.
Good day.
Hello everybody. So some sort of early access Kickstarter thing has happened, but it's happened so soon to the recording of this podcast that I have no opinion about it whatsoever. It's called Early Ninja. Some sort of way of vetting or quality controlling or something to try and improve the experience of people buying in on early access games.
That's been around for ages, though, as in that general concept, because that's what, like, isn't that what Ubisoft were doing with their... Is it Ubisoft? Who am I thinking of? The people who basically said that they would offer some kind of advice and... reassurances that a game idea had been fleshed out.
Yeah, it's a similar thing. It's
and also the whole sort of idea of paying it forward by devs to other devs on Kickstarter, things like that,
I don't know how much exact overlap there is there, that specific bit, but I do know that there is both a Kickstarter page and a website with a lot of charts. And I don't know about you, but I wasn't in the mood for charts.
Well, I wasn't expecting us to have this as news at all.
Well, what I was going to say is, because it is genuinely a thing, we've set a precedent for discussing the vagaries of early access and that related stuff. I thought, rather than ignore it completely, let's acknowledge it, but let's also say, I think we should talk about this when A, we know what the fuck it is, and probably some developers have responded. Because that's the big question for me with any initiative like this, no matter how well-meaning, is what is the buy-in from developers and would they find it useful? So definitely exists, but God knows. Also in the news today, it's Resident Evil 7, which I have to admit snuck up on me completely. Like, it went from what I thought was a sort of tech demo-y kind of thing to a game that's out and everyone seems to love very suddenly. But that might just be me not paying attention. Tom, you've been paying attention.
Yeah, I've played it like 1 or 2 hours a bit. I also played the demo a few times, which is what they've kind of been re-releasing almost with, like 2 or 3 times they've released it and they've added new kind of secrets and stuff to it each time. And it's a first-person horror game in the mode of, I guess, Outlast or Amnesia or those games, but with a lot of kind of Resident Evil tropes. Like, there's a bit where you find green herbs in a bin, and then you can mash that into a thing that you can eat to heal after you've been slashed with a chainsaw. So it starts out feeling like almost like an art house horror in the vein of PT or something, but then it kind of after the hour point starts to become much more of a traditional Resident Evil game. But it's just fresh enough and kind of peeled back enough to feel really exciting and genuinely scary. And it's shed a lot of the baggage that series had acquired over the last sort of 2 or 3 entries.
That's a lot of baggage.
Yeah, holy crap. I mean, that series went off the rails. So, like, Resident Evil 4 was this really brave reinvention of the series, and Resident Evil 4 is just an incredible game. 5 was just the kind of super stupid Michael Bay action movie version of Resident Evil 4, and then 6 was just the pits, unless... your PC Game Register Samuel Roberts, who absolutely loved the Mercenaries mode, which is kind of like a horde wave survival mode, which always was quite good in 4, 5, and 6 actually.
Yeah,
but yeah. With all that said, it was desperately fucked. Yeah. Really, like it was just crazy bloated. It had been swallowed up by its own mythology and characters like Wesker, and it's just become so many different varieties of mutant, like T, Z, A, like all of the mutant virus types of Wesker. I feel like I've fought so many Weskers over the years.
Too many Weskers.
And it's great just to be a first person just camera going into a haunted place with a dodgy flashlight and some jump scares.
So in the hour you've played, I take it that you haven't been on a high octane minecart ride?
Not yet.
Okay.
Anything could happen. Though there are some zany aspects of, those are just mad bits of Resident Evil 4 that, the series is already quite crazy by that point.
Yeah.
But
you do fight a very small Napoleon.
You do.
It
turns into a plant or something, I can't remember.
People forget that when they talk
about
it. In
his castle, yeah. But that, it always seemed, somehow the tone of that game is perfect, Resident Evil 4, because it's just, it's the series becoming an action game, and it's kind of bought into a kind of certain level of action movie silliness that just works for it, and it just hasn't worked since. And they run out of ideas for it quite quickly. But now it's interesting to just already be seeing the effects that PT has had on designers. This free demo that Kojima released onto consoles, which was this just recurring loop where you just go through the same corridors and over again, but there are slight changes and just strange puzzles to solve. And Resident Evil 7 feels very much like that, particularly because the demo is the first few rooms of the game itself. So going into Resident Evil 7 feels like strangely familiar, but also still quite scary, because I'm used to going through this same part of the house over and over again and experiencing different things. And that's a new type of horror that I've not really experienced before in games. Even though the kind of stuff it relies on is very, very safe horror cliches. So it's, you're deep in Louisiana, there's a rickety house, and there's some, inbred hick cannibals. All of that stuff is just in there, just wholesale, just a Texas Chainsaw Massacre, just straight up. Yeah. Like immediately.
Like cabin in the woods style dialer trope.
Absolutely.
Kind of thing.
And it's not surprising in any way yet. I hope it kind of has some cool monsters and stuff, or some interesting scares, or something that's actually got some sort of intelligence to it, some intelligent horror, like Silent Hill type stuff, rather than just being a corridor crawler, though I suspect that's what it is really at heart. I think it's a very well-made, effective one so far. I'm really looking forward to seeing how it kind of escalates.
So even though it's a numbered sequel, I take it there is no connection narratively to...
Not from the outset, though. Apparently there are kind of little ties, and it becomes more explicit as the game goes on. And in the demo, you pick up a picture of a helicopter which has the Umbrella logo on, and Umbrella is the evil science lab that makes all these kind of viruses that mutate people into zombies and stuff, all that nonsense.
So there's hope. You could end up fighting a tiny Napoleon.
Could fight a tiny Napoleon plant demon.
Yeah,
maybe that's how it ends.
That's exciting. I'm definitely going to give it a go. Have you found that it has become less scary as you've acclimatized to it? Because I definitely found that with PT.
Yeah, definitely. That certainly happened. Like, PT has to go to extraordinary lengths to keep you almost interested in it. There's a bit where it all goes red for about half an hour. Where a load of the loops you do in PT, all the lighting has changed and all the pictures are turned into eyeballs looking around. Like, they have to just go crazy with that environment to keep you interested in it. And this doesn't quite do that. Like, you open the fridge and it's gross. You open the microwave and there's a half-cooked crow in there for some reason. And it's all the same stuff over and over again. It's gross. The game is gross as well. Like, it's just, if you're kind of put off by rotting stuff and just flies and disease and pestilence, then stay away from Resident Evil 7.
A biohazard.
The biohazard. Yeah, they've kind of effectively, it's Resident Evil 7 biohazard now, isn't it?
Which is the name of the first game.
Yeah, of course.
That's right. Biohazard in Japan.
Yeah, so they've merged both now.
Which means that presumably in Japan this game is called Biohazard 7. Biohazard.
Biohazard 7 Resident Evil. It's nice to have a Resident Evil where there's actually a residence as well. Yeah. It's really going back to the first game, There's a house, it's bad. Be careful.
That took me so long to get with The Evil Within that name basically just means Resident Evil.
Yeah.
Like, if the title of the series is Where's the Evil? And alternatively, Here's the Evil. Pip, is everything going all right with that cardboard box you're climbing into?
No, I just want to put my feet up, but the thing wasn't going very well, and I thought you'd complain if I broke your box, but then it wasn't as stealthy as I thought it might be.
I just wanted to let anyone listening to this spooky chat in on what was happening in case they believed that the Pip climbing into a box was coming from inside the house or something.
Well, maybe we should have. That would have been atmospheric sound effects. That could have been my Foley.
The evil within the box.
Yeah, exactly.
It's Pip.
The chaotic evil.
Isn't Foley a type of catheter as well as a type of sound effects?
Is it?
Yeah, like you get a Foley catheter. Which I don't know, maybe makes just noises.
Like a kazoo.
Like footsteps on gravel.
Yeah. Like a scrunching noise.
A melon being hit with a fire axe.
Anyway, sorry, you go ahead.
You didn't have a spectacular time with PT, did you, Pip?
No, and none of this sounds appealing either. It sounds awful.
I feel like we're discussing the game Pip will never, ever, under any circumstances, play.
Oh yeah, no, I stopped listening after horror. So, I don't know, actually no, I was listening, but, with Tom saying, PT just gets, you get used to it after a while. No, you don't.
No, you don't.
No, you just don't.
You turn green and don't sleep for days, is what happens.
Yes. Yes. So, yes, I don't think I will be playing that.
No.
And if you play it, then I'm going to make sure you shut the door so that it can't get out.
I already had to do that with the Dishonored mask.
Yep. Well, you know the drill now.
But yeah, so it is shaping up as you have experienced it so far.
So far, so good. I'll report back in future pods.
Okay, yeah, I'll play. Maybe next week will be a proper...
It could go to shit knowing Resident Evil. It could just go off a right cliff at any moment, which is quite exciting.
I kind of, perversely, not for my own enjoyment, but in some sort of broader sense, sort of want it to.
Yeah, for sure.
I want you to, I'd love someone, I don't want them to actually do this because obviously careers and livelihoods and the quality of a series people enjoy is at stake. But, I want to see the curve that goes from PT style hyper-detailed slow exploration of 3 rooms of a naturalistic if horrendous house to trying to make sure you fire the Stinger missile launcher at Wesker's helicopter in time before he turns into Sea Wesker. You know what I mean?
Oh man,
what the arc would be like.
That'd be amazing. If that happens, then the reviewers have done a very good job of covering up.
Yeah.
Yeah, if that happens, I hope that happens.
Oh man.
That bit with the flying squid really jumped the shark.
Yeah, exactly.
Good. Yeah, I'll let you know.
That sounds good. Pip, speaking of things people wouldn't expect Pip to play, what have you been playing?
Unity of Command.
Exactly.
Yes. Although I guess that's kind of the point, because it was for our new regular or semi-regular thing on RPS called Game Swap, where we recommend games to each other that we wouldn't necessarily go for, without that push, I guess. The rules are that it has to be a genuine recommendation and not a troll. And so Graham recommended Unity of Command to me because I think he was hoping that it would be something along the lines of strategy and war games and turn-based stuff that I could actually get something out of, as well as perhaps, being a way into more complicated games in that field. So I sat down and played bits of it over the weekend, and then today I was playing a bit more, and then we had our debrief. But I mean, I've actually been enjoying it more than I thought I would. It won't be a gateway in any way, shape or form, because it's still too far away from anything that I associate with, grand strategy and proper, full-on wargaming. It's still very sort of abstracted and sort of almost to the sort of less military strategy and more like those puzzles you'd get in the papers where, you've got a chessboard that's already got some pieces on it and you have to figure out how to make the winning move, or, how to achieve a certain thing in a certain number of moves. It's a lot more that kind of way of thinking. It just happens to be wearing World War II clothes and talking a lot about Stalingrad. So, yeah, it's an odd one in that it really doesn't act as a bridge, but it is accessible and far more so than I thought it would be. Because I remember when he mentioned it, I was looking at the page Graham, have you lost your mind? I didn't say that. I was really positive and can do about it all. I was like, yeah, I'll give this a go. Inwardly, you, what? But yeah, and so it was a nice surprise in that way. And also I think because I don't play any war games really, certainly not ones that tend to be based on actual historical conflict. So in a really strange way, it was a breath of fresh air, because I've played so many fantasy games and so many kind of, you know, like gritty urban settings, or how, you know, the 1940s is actually, even though it's so prevalent in games, it's something that I don't encounter an awful lot of. So yeah, it was kind of an interesting one, and I have not got far with it at all, and I booted up the manual first and nearly quit out of the entire thing because it's 45 pages long and you only start learning about how to play the game on page 8.
What are the first 7 pages about?
Oh, I don't know. Something about Stalingrad again, you know. But yeah, like sort of interfacey kind of things, I think. But yeah, by that point I was like, oh, come on. And so I just booted up and started like the tutorial campaign.
Which one is there drawing arrows involved?
I think you can do that, but mostly I'm just selecting units and then it shows you the hexes that they can move to from there, and like it's orange if you can make a move and things.
So it's kind of turn-based, World War II.
So it's, like it's set, sort of it's a bunch of campaigns that take place over the Battle of Stalingrad. And so you tend to spawn into this hex. Well, I mean, you spawn into this hex world, and it gives you a few objectives that you need to move onto to capture. And then there's just a bunch of different units in different places, and so you have to work out like which trade-offs you're willing to make, and you know where you can pressure. And you've got like theatre assets, I think they're called, in terms of like airstrikes and supply drops and stuff.
I thought you meant like a panto horse. Or...
That would have been great. But I think it's more about, so, you know, you learn pretty early on that you're essentially trying to just protect your line of supply a lot of the time, because otherwise if you don't, your units get sort of more and more shit. So, you know, they eventually lose the ability to attack and things like that. There's like, I think it's a step system or something. I really can't remember. This was probably in the first 8 pages. But it's to do with like, you can sort of see the pips on a unit of soldiers, and that corresponds to like their movement and attack capabilities and sort of the damage that they can do and how vulnerable they are to attack and stuff. But yeah, and so the majority of it so far has been bashing my head against the AI, trying to figure out like how to meet these particular objectives in the time frame allowed. And because it's only things like, oh, you've got 6 turns to do this in, or whatever else, it's actually a lot better for me in that I don't ever feel like I'll get to turn 105 and go, oh, that move that I made, 6 days ago is the thing that has now cost me this campaign. So I think it feels like it's manageable chunks, and that in turn has switched it from kind of being a broad strategy game and a military command game into a puzzle solving game. So, and I think again that's why it's not going to act as a bridge to anything more complicated, because as soon as you get more complicated you get all of the things that I don't want anything to do with, I think. But yeah, so that has been interesting. And I've clearly learnt something, because I'm getting to, I'm on the 2nd campaign. But, oh no, I finished the 2nd campaign. I'm on the 3rd campaign. But I went back to try the earlier one again, because if you do it in fewer moves, you can get other types of victory. Like, you get normal victory, but you can also get like decisive victory and brilliant victory and things like that. And I'm like, I want me one of them. Maybe I've learned enough that on the first level I could get one of those things. And I couldn't actually even do it again the 2nd time. I was like, oh, I'm sad now. So I don't necessarily know that I've learned much about this. I know not to, like, I don't know, send horses into a tank. You know, that's a trade that's not going to work.
Yeah.
In fairness, that is a thing that had to be learned. So, you know.
And to be fair, like, if you have the units in adjacent hexes and you mouse over the one that you're going to attack, it does give you an idea of how outmatched they are.
The horse
like,
looking worried.
It's just that at some points you're just like, oh, well, I'm really close to defeat anyway. I might as well throw some horses at this and see whether that
See
solves
what
the
happens.
problem. Yeah,
They don't cost much and
exactly.
whatever.
Like, maybe this will be the lucky horse that, like, turns the Battle of
The Luke Skywalker
Stalingrad or something. I don't know.
torpedo.
So yeah, that's been a weird experience.
I have to admit, when you said what game Graham had recommended to you, I did think he was trolling you. Not because you don't enjoy, like, the complicated puzzles, because you do, but the idea of you really getting deep into, like, a quite grey, like, spending hours invested in a sea of grey little Nazi helmets on a huge map of Russia.
I am not a fan of hexes, anything involving hexes, but especially strategy involving hexes.
You like bees.
I like hex cells, actually,
Okay.
as well. So, okay, fine. Let's refine that slightly. I'm not very good at, or I have no patience for things that are like terrain hexes and strategy games. And I really don't gravitate towards anything with a sort of real historical setting because that's uncomfortable. And and I mean, you know, so sitting down to play this and sort of, you know, the first campaign in the list that it gives you play as the Nazis, and I'm like, right, okay. And, you know, having a basic idea of what happened in the Battle of Stalingrad, you also get slightly uncomfortable. But then it sort of turns into this thing that is so abstracted and so kind of difficult to feel any parallels with a real human battle. Like, it's that sort of super top level strategizing where it's essentially like, it does so much for you. You don't have to do much of the granular stuff. You're free to sort of have quite a limited tool set and then just try and play with that. So I am enjoying that. And we wrote the write-up of that idea today. And I was playing it this evening, so that's clearly on my own time.
Yeah, like you surprised me earlier when you said that you'd already written the thing, because earlier on you were playing it, and I figured, yeah,
you were like, I'm gonna leave you to it.
Yeah, you just keep
so that was
moving
nice.
the little Russians around.
Yeah. So I'm pleased that I played something different. But yeah, I don't see where it would lead other than more puzzle games, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Or maybe something like Fire Emblem. Like, that was the other thing that he recommended, but, you know, for DS.
Yeah, you should play Fire Emblem.
Yeah, it's great.
Yes.
You can borrow my copy.
Ah.
That's easy.
Yeah, that was the next thing I was going to ask.
Yeah.
So fine. Brilliant.
Maybe Advance Wars? That's really good as well.
I didn't get on with Advance Wars. I think it's because I don't care about machines. And it was like, here's a machine, go do a thing. And I'm like,
You should play Fire Emblem,
Yeah.
because Fire Emblem is just like nice pals. They fighting, but now they kissing.
Do you know why he
why it's
recommended
good.
this to me,
No.
to Unity of Command? It was because I'd said that I liked the Banner Saga, and he knows that I can deal with complexity in the form of, like, Dota or whatever. So there is a strategizing element there at work, and Banner Saga has turn-based combat. And I kind of, when he explained that, I did feel like saying, I like the story.
Yeah.
I would have happily handed it to a child next to me to do that.
Hey.
No, because I was do you remember I was on the plane on the way somewhere, and I had it on my iPad, and there was like a little 3-year-old who was sat next to me who kept looking over in a really excited way because like I think the graphics made it look like a cartoon, and I think he wanted to sort of see the cartoon. And I sort of felt like saying, look, you'll have just as much luck as I will at this point. I mean, you know, things have gone awry.
Speaking of Banner Saga, aren't they doing a Kickstarter?
Kickstarting Banner Saga 3.
Indeed.
Cool.
Yes.
Don't know anything else about it. But,
No.
you know,
Though there's
That's
going
about
to
it,
be
really, isn't it?
more beautiful hand-drawn animation.
Yeah.
More lovely music. It's just a beautiful game to be in, isn't it, Vanilla Saga? I
Mm.
love it.
Really atmospheric as well. They've
Yeah.
properly nailed the tone that they were going for, I think, which is awesome.
Yeah, the cracking game if you haven't played it.
Yeah, I played the first one on the iPad. It's beautiful on the iPad. Dragging and dropping things. Oh, it's great.
Yeah, Banner might be in some ways as close as you get to Fire Emblem on PC.
Yeah.
Fire Emblem, we've probably said this on the pod before, but it's one of those series that I'm amazed that doesn't have a PC, an easily point-atable PC equivalent.
There's a niche there for someone to come and just basically rip that off.
Yeah, exactly.
because
I mean,
great ideas.
Banner Saga's almost there, but Banner Saga is quite a sad story, really. And it's a bit depressing.
It's bleak.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't get the moment where your friend who you're about to probably marry jumps in front of you to parry a blow and then counterattacks with a fireball or something, which Fire Emblem does really, really well. Really
yeah, it's a soap opera mixed with a battle game, which is
superb.
the best. That's
Yeah.
the best.
How exciting. I won't be able to talk about it here, obviously.
No. But perhaps on one of our branching spin-offs, which is the Fire Emblem episode, we could do that. Do anything we want now.
What about you? What have you been playing?
I have been playing Blood Bowl 2, which is the second of Cyanide's adaptations of Games Workshop's very old, very well-regarded fantasy football, American football game. And I say fantasy football, but not in the sense of fantasy football, but in that it is literally American football played by the races of the old Warhammer universe. So orcs and elves and chaos warriors and so on and so on and so on. And I hadn't really played Blood Bowl much. I was sort of been fairly aware for a long time, but I'm now playing in a league with various friends, including sort of former PC gamer folk like Rich McCormick and Owen Hill and Chris Bratt from Eurogamer and many more besides, like Matt and Kieran and so on and Alex. So it's been fun. And people have varying degrees of expertise with Blood Bowl, which goes back to, I've literally played this my entire life, and my first act as a thinking adult was to buy myself a Blood Bowl set in the 80s, to I'm discovering it now, which is, I think, when myself and Chris Bratt are with it. And so some of the things I have to say about it are to do with this particular video game adaptation of it, but because it is a faithful adaptation of the tabletop game, some of the things I have to say about it are, I guess, about the tabletop game. But Blood Bowl is super weird because it is a grid-based strategy game about, blocking and tackling and creating zones that enemy players can't reliably get past and increasing the odds that you'll trip someone over and that kind of thing, and fighting over a ball and trying to get a ball all the way to the opponent's end zone. And that is what Blood Bowl is. But it's, and then within that, there's loads of dice rolls and there's loads of random chance. Like, if you're the type of person who found it frustrating that XCOM made you try and take shots that were really chancy or had missions that could swing over whether or not your sniper just makes this crazy shot or not. If that kind of randomness frustrates you, then you should literally never ever play Blood Bowl under any circumstances. Because it isn't just a game where, if you want to run one square further than your player's movement value allows, you can do so, but you roll a dice you don't roll a dice, the game rolls a dice for you, and on a 1, that person just falls on their ass. But it goes further than that. If you're playing in a league like we are, and you have a rotating kind of set of opponents and persistent teams, your player could die. They could run, fall over, and die forever, and you'd have to pay out of your team's funds to replace them, or go with a person short. And so the theatre of it is brilliant because just mad shit is always happening. People are fumbling the ball and dropping it, and also in a crazy thing, which seems mental to me, but apparently it works, is, it's like a real sport, it has limited time. And so you have each player has 8 turns in a given half, and then there's 8 turns and then the game ends, and, like sport. If any of your players fuck something up, like fail in their attempt to push somebody over, or fumble while picking up the ball, or fall over while trying to run a little bit further, you get a turnover, which means your turn immediately ends, regardless of how many action points you've got left on any of your people.
Yeah. Imagine if you're playing XCOM and you miss a shot, and then the aliens just get to move. the entire alien force until they miss a shot.
Yeah, so one thing it forces you to do is to do things in like descending order of sure thingness. So, your first move should always be the most reliable things.
Yeah.
And there are things that can't randomly fail, like just walking, as long as you're not being, guarded by an enemy player and as long as you're not going too far. So it's not totally unreasonable, but it can create these crazy swingy moments when things that should be a sure thing fail. And you don't have any rerolls left, which is one of the ways it mitigates that. And suddenly it's the opponent's turn and that's it. And then on top of that, you have a layer of just like random events that can happen. So players can get injured in a million different ways or die. But there are events like a crowd surge or a riot or like brilliant coaching, which might give one player an extra turn and that kind of thing, which can be huge. And sometimes that can be like really kind of interesting in a strategic way and force you to rethink how you're kind of, you're going to approach the game. And sometimes it can be the biggest anticlimax ever, as happened, yesterday when me and Chris Brack played our game. And we were at a very tense 1-all standoff with two turns each to go. And because both of our teams are quite slow, 2 turns is how long it would take in the best case scenario to score a goal or a touchdown. So, like, it was all about every single move mattered if either of us was going to pull ahead and win that match. But then randomly we had like the crowd riot event, which removes a turn from both players. So now we only had 1 turn, so there was no point doing anything, right? Because the game was over. Like, there was no way either of us could score. It was definitely going to be a draw. And at that point, sticking around to punch enemy players in the hope that you kill them felt like the worst dick move, because all we're trying to do is then disadvantage them for the rest of the league. So there's all this kind of sort of randomness and theatre to it. And I'm not opposed to that at all in a tabletop context, because it's really fun. Like, it's a really fun hour and a half of sat with a mate, watching your silly little men that you've given silly names, tackle each other and fall over, and sort of the mad stuff happens. And there's just enough strategy there to make it feel like you're really playing a game. But then beyond that, it's a sort of a sea of dice. And if you, for me, I think if you stare into that, trying to master it, trying to like move beyond probability to the point where you can really play it, I feel that way madness lies. And I fear for genuinely competitive people who are just getting into this, who are convinced that if they just work hard enough, it won't fundamentally be a game where sometimes the dice are going to fuck you.
How is Rich McCormick doing?
Rich McCormick is staying up, painting his Warhammer figures, and meticulously watching every replay of every game played in the league. The person I'm more worried about is Quinns, who is approaching this, I think, with a Netrunner player's mind.
Oh no!
And so he's doomed.
Always fear a good Netrunner player.
Yeah, but I think this will destroy him because it is madness.
It's the opposite of Netrunner, to be honest.
It is, yeah. And so, in both a Pip sense and a Tom Francis sense. It's, and so that's kind of mad. I mean, I say all this and I imagine there are people who are screaming at their podcast players now, because I have, real life friends who play Blood Bowl a lot in real life, who I've met through tabletop stuff, who insist that beyond that sense of randomness only lasts for your first X 100 hours with it. Right. And that beyond that is the glittering land of it's not bollocks anymore. Where it is actually this game of pure skill and strategic headroom, and the game has world championships that are very well attended, and this is in the real life tabletop version. But by all accounts, there's a game there. My best understanding of it, though, is as a game that looks more like a real sport than it is, because it literally is a game about sport. It's more like, it's basically theatre about sport, which is maybe a strange kind of notion, but it's a bit like if you had 2 people on a stage in a play playing tennis, you wouldn't call it a tennis match. And that's kind of how I've ended up feeling about Blood Bowl. It's a story that you generate between 2 people, and it's the ongoing story of your team. Like, I have a beastman who's a bit slow now because he's got a bad leg, and I've got a beastman who's got 3 arms now because he had a very good game. And it's about that ongoing story, and telling that story, and who wins or loses is not totally immaterial, but probably not worth worrying about too much, because sometimes it's just gonna go, sorry, nah.
Where are you in the league?
Pretty much squarely in the middle.
Have the people who have been playing it since they were in nappies, done any better?
No. Okay. Grill's below me, and I think he's been playing it for a long time. So that ratifies my idea that I think we're in, which is not to draw back from the achievements of the people who are doing well at all, but it does feel like a sort of soup of weird things.
Maybe it's one of those things where, like, it feels like a league is exactly the right way to play that game, where you just get loads and loads of games in, which means loads and loads of dice rolls. So over the longer period with enough dice rolls, like, the probabilities play out more predictably, and maybe over the course of a long league, the skill really shows through by the end.
I think a few years of, well, no, a year and a half, I guess, of very regularly rolling dice in a competitive context, I now just accept that spikes will happen and weird things that shouldn't happen will happen. Like, and that games will sometimes hinge on chance. I think if you're not necessarily that ready for it, it can be really frustrating. It's interesting as a game though, to focus on the computer game side of it, because as an adaptation, it's quite, the production values are quite high. Like they put a lot of effort into it. It's all a bit, it's, you know, if I say Games Workshop video game, with the exception of the few of them that have really crested above the sort of standard of production set by most of them, like Dawn of War and maybe Vermintide really stand out as like great games made in that universe, and Total War actually. There's a lot of like quite 6, 7 out of 10-ish.
I was going to say there's a soup of 6 out of 10 Games Workshop licensed.
So many.
And I think this is a solid representation of the core rules. But it's got a little bit of that 6 out of 10-ish packaging. Like it has the announcers, like the Blood Bowl announcers who talk fucking constantly. And fair play to them, they recorded a lot of commentary for that game. But at the same time, all of the jokes are like just a little bit south of really funny. In the way that I sometimes find quite a lot of Warhammer humour to be.
To be fair, have you listened to sports commentary?
No, actually, yeah. And it's quite well observed, but it's like, yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think the trouble is like the Warhammer humour is supposed to be good on paper, and also when you're kind of joking about it with your friend while you're playing a game, you're not necessarily supposed to be exposed to it with voice actors and stuff. It's
interesting because it's the kind of joke I can imagine working if you were around a table in the pub playing this.
Yeah.
And it's equally the kind of joke I can imagine working if you were reading about it in the pages of White Dwarf or something. But there's something about actors performing Warhammer knob gags that has never really worked.
It's really weird. Like, I get the same thing with Discworld stuff as well.
Yeah,
where I feel like on the page, it's so much funnier than when I hear it kind of being acted at me, or see it being acted at me in a drama. Yeah. Which just doesn't seem to work somehow. It's quite weird.
And Discworld's such a massive influence on Warhammer.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
I think that, you know, there's lineage there. And it has like a campaign that you can play through as one team to learn the ropes. It does quite a good job of removing whole game mechanics until you're kind of ready to learn about them. But what that does mean, if you play like the first 3 missions and then jump into a skirmish or into a multiplayer game, you're probably fucked because it hasn't told you what it hasn't told you. And it has a weird interface. Like it has the kind of interface that I don't know how. There are things about the menus and the team creation process and just the process for doing things where it's largely fine, but when something doesn't make any sense, it really makes no sense whatsoever. Like, occasionally, randomly, the confirmation button, if you get a pop-up window on a computer that wants you to confirm something, and it's like okay and cancel. Okay is universally on the left and cancel's on the right.
Yeah.
This is a game that mixes that up sometimes just to fuck with you. Like,
nice.
Little things like after you've created and named a team and maybe bought players or whatever, you were never allowed to rename anything ever again, but you can change your team's motto.
Okay.
And so what people do is they might buy a cat player and not realize they missed the opportunity to name them or change what their head looks like or something, and not realize you've lost that opportunity forever. And because it's a persistent game,
a bit harsh, isn't it?
You can't sell that person back. You have to like put the muck in the market in order to get someone you can rename. And so there's lots of janky stuff like that. There's like and you know, I'd like to its credit, it's really cool that it has this functionality to run a league that it will manage for you. Like I'd love more games to adopt stuff like that.
That's really...
It's the best way to play that game by miles. And it's created like a lovely new chat room to be in with people that I wouldn't normally chat to as much as I do, even though if everyone's just bemoaning the fate of their latest casualty. And it's great that it lets you do that. But it just feels like it's like a polish pass from being as good as people, you know, to fully live up to the reputation of the game that it's built on top of. Because like,
it looks really nice. I like the effort they've invested in animations and just general kind of, it's quite shiny. I'm also very glad they just faithfully translated the rule set, because another studio did More Time, and they sort of made a very strange game, sort of based on what More Time originally was. And I kind of wanted to play the board game, but in a more manageable fashion with cool graphics. And to that extent, it feels like Blood Bowl 2 has succeeded. And those original games were popular because of the design as much as anything else, like the way that they're put together. So it's nice not to have a kind of weird bastardized video game version of it. It's nice to have the actual rule set represented in the video game form.
Yeah, and because it feels really transferable. Like I could go and play Blood Bowl now.
Yeah.
And I understand what's going on with it. But yeah, like, and maybe that is where some of the complexity and some of the problems come from, is there are things that, like, there's the most absurd animation for when because the way it works is one player deploys their team and the other player deploys their team in response to it, based on who's attacking and who's defending. And when you move a player, there's this absurd, like, Star Trek beaming up, beaming down animation, which I can't imagine why it's there. Because all it's doing is replacing what would be the most natural thing in the world in a tabletop game, which is just moving a model with your hand. And they felt the need to do something.
They could have a giant hand.
Yeah, they probably should have had a big hand come down and pick them up. Yeah. Or just have the player run over to the place you've just moved them to. That would be one way of handling that.
Yeah.
They could have had the hand of Gork.
Yeah, indeed. I think that's actually a thing, isn't it?
No, there's the foot of Gork.
Is there a fist of Gork?
Maybe.
Yeah, they're supposed to be bipeds with hands.
There's supposed to be all of the rest of Gork as well. But yeah, no, I think we should all just have a pause to appreciate Pip's on point Warhammer lore reference. I was going to ask about More Time, actually, because I haven't played it, but because I asked you, is this actually More Time? And you said no.
I've not played it. I need to, I need to dip back into it, because I played it in early access.
Right.
And so I've no idea what they've fixed about it. But it was very odd. I found it very odd kind of conversion of it. The stuff they've kept in it, like, one of the best things about More Time is the progression between, each kind of mission, where your characters can get arms lopped off and that affects their skills. And, sometimes you can fix better arms on and stuff like that. So there's a very kind of quirky progression element, which they were supposed to simulate, but wasn't in the build that I was playing. So I'll have to go back and see how it all really works.
Yeah.
To actually make a judgment.
Because actually, like, one thing this experience with Blood Bowl has taught me is I'd love More Time, but with a persistent campaign multiplayer option.
Yeah.
So not just like I don't know if the new game supports that. Because that is the thing, like, it's a good Blood Bowl game because it supports leagues and because it supports the way that game is best played.
Sure.
The way More Time is best played is when you have like 6 or 7 people who are all playing campaign games against each other and leveling up separately and coming together in different configurations.
Yeah.
And that game doesn't exist on PC, as far as I know. If it does, I'd love to know about it, because that is something I would love to play.
Yeah, for sure.
And
maybe More Times that. There's also a new Necromunda game coming up, which is
Yeah.
kind of 40k skirmish combat. Though I'm not sure that had the same progression elements, because I'd never played it.
I think it did. I think it wasn't More Time basically just Warhammer Fantasy.
Yeah, I think that was the idea of it, for sure.
Yeah. Well, because they basically have the same name, right?
Yeah.
Like
named after the city.
Death Town and Death Town.
Of course.
Yeah. Like,
yeah, nice.
Death Planet and Death Town, I guess. But yeah, so that's what I've been doing. I've been punching little rats and punching little dwarfs and losing all my games. Or drawing.
Who wants a question? It's me!
Okay, let's do questions. There we go.
Okay, you tell we've had several attempts at this.
Time for a question. Who wants a question?
Ooh,
Do you want a question, Tom?
Yes.
All right. So we're just for questions.
Let's do it.
Okay. Drew writes, Overwatch's 4th seasonal event starts today. Fruity semicolon. Is there an upward trend in cosmetic DLC in games, and what do you think of it? So it's not really clear whether this means upward trend in terms of the quality,
or the price,
or the price,
or the frequency,
or the quantity. Yeah. So, I think it is. I think the answer is yes to the first part completely. Like, there is a lot more of these, big cosmetic DLC events happening around games. And on the whole, the quality of them is improving.
Some
really?
and some.
You mean, they become more elaborate. There's more tied in. There's, the experiments have been done and people have settled on what works. So, these Overwatch seasonal events are, lots of games do this. So, I'd say that there's definitely a trend. In terms of what do I think about it, I don't care. Which is not to dismiss the thing. It's just, Overwatch is a perfectly fine game, but these, like, the promise of a time-limited hat is, even for me, not a draw.
I think it's great in the sense that it could be so much worse.
Yeah.
Having come out of an era where, lots of monetization experimentation has happened with free-to-play, and it's mostly been awful. This is probably the least harmful to the game experience of most of the monetization mechanisms you can expect to see.
I think I tend to enjoy cosmetics when it's about me choosing things to dress my, favourite characters up in. And so Dota's system, especially when I can just pick what I want to get, I quite like. And also there hasn't been a fee for owning the game in the first place. So I kind of feel like that's part of my way of saying, I have spent upwards of 1,000 hours on this thing, so here is some money for making that experience and to sort of augment my relationship with it. Whereas with Overwatch, it's like, well, I've already paid for this once. And so I think it doesn't quite have that same I would like to do a nice thing element to it. Or, like I want to somehow support the work that has been done, or, the work of third parties in the case of, the Dota workshop and stuff like that. But the other thing is that because I just sort of don't really play Overwatch anymore and I don't feel the pull to, like, none of these events have particularly made me want to come back. Like, I've sort of looked at the things that you could get maybe, and I mean, I don't really want any wall sprays or, any of those kinds of things, and maybe some of the outfits would be nice, but you're not guaranteed to get them, and so then it just becomes a kind of, oh, well, it's either a money sink or a time sink, and the game for me right now just isn't enjoyable enough to warrant that, and so it's not going to get me to come back in the way that I might if it was a different kind of game or asking for a different investment, or even if I could just buy a few of the things that I would quite like straight up.
I'll tell you what, I definitely prefer it when there's like a seasonal event that just changes something about the game that everyone can see and then goes away again at the end of that thing. Like Counter-Strike's silly little chicken costumes, where you'll have the little Halloween chicken or the Christmas chicken or something. Over
Christmas, do you remember they also had the lights, the Christmas fairy lights that were like strung over, the kill screen, so you'd watch somebody teabagging you, but there would be a festive, tableau that framed it.
Roshan wears a Christmas hat for the duration of Christmas in Dota.
Yeah.
It's not a cosmetic, he just does, and then
and
it goes away again.
in League of Legends, they figured out how to make the snowscape in the new map and stuff like that.
I think I prefer that kind of thing, because it makes it feel special when you log in, but then it goes away again, because, like, I have actually started playing Overwatch again, and I am enjoying it. But the other day, it first scared the shit out of me, and then slightly kind of, ruined the atmosphere of the game a bit to be in the spawn room waiting for the match to start and to hear some particular pre-recorded bit of dialogue between the Zenyatta on my team, the kind of robot monk, and I think Genji. Like, they have a lot of different lines to each other. And I couldn't see Zenyatta, and then I realized that Zenyatta was the levitating, horrifying wooden toy man floating behind me, because he was wearing the Christmas skin that I hadn't seen. That stuff is all in the game now, so occasionally you're going to be killed by Christmas Lucio, even though it's Chinese New Year, and like, it gets messier and kind of spoils the sense of it as a Christmas treat in a way, I think. Yeah. Like, you'll be seeing Christmas costumes when Halloween rolls around, and when Christmas rolls around again, you're going to be seeing last year's Christmas costumes mixed with this year's Christmas costumes, and it'll just sort of accumulate, I think. Whereas I do prefer it when there's just like a fun one-off thing that you can participate in. But I guess that tends to be free, and free is not what they're aiming for here. So
I think there's a certain, like, appeal to something being time limited and you having a version of it and someone else not, you know, that's sort of always been part of sort of certainly the limited edition cosmetics. People would just be like, well, you know, look at my fancy, this, that and the other, you know, it's why you got all of those messages when you got that loot drop at the
International,
you know, it's like, oh, fancy thing, you know.
Oh yeah, I get that people definitely want it. It's a question of,
But I think certainly in the case of Overwatch, they haven't done it in a way that I find appealing or that encourages me back into the game in any way. You know, I kind of look at the thing and go, oh, okay, that's an interesting screenshot of a person in an outfit, you know, but it doesn't make me think, and now I will go and play Overwatch because...
Yeah, like, logging to try the new modes, because I know they are doing new play modes with each of these updates as well, but Peter writes, and this is sort of related, I guess, whenever marketing comes up on the pod, it's rarely in a positive light. Who, in your opinion, is doing it well?
I guess there are two perspectives you can come at this question with. So there's the kind of what's effective mindset, in which case a lot of things that are quite shitty are actually quite effective in marketing terms. But maybe from our personal perspectives as people who like games and just want to know what the games are and what, you know, they look like and how they play, then that's a different perspective entirely. So I guess we should probably go with the second one.
Well, I think, because we have a very different experience of marketing departments and things because, you know, obviously in this job, sometimes we're asking questions that are not positive things about the game. And so, you know, sort of trying to negotiate your way towards actually getting any kind of an answer is fraught. And, you know, that's why you so often get, you know, we reached out to these people for comment. We will let you know if they get back to you. You know, and I think that comes into conflict with marketing strategies, because marketing strategies are about getting out particular messages and not focusing on particular points and sort of making sure that people, you know what the game is, but also that they, you know, see it in a positive light and want to buy it and things. And a lot of our job is sort of trying to strip that away to the point where we don't feel we're misleading people when we talk about things.
Yeah, so marketing is like really, really phased. So there'll be like one particular aspect or vision of the game they want to go out, and then anything else about the game will just be completely blanketed and not talked about until the next phase, until the phase has come when that's ready to be talked about.
Yeah, like March is the plasma gun, and June
precisely.
is the grenade launcher.
And then we'll do a 3-stage class reveal and bi-weekly intervals. The problem comes when, if in the opening phases, just the basic outline of what people are getting for their potential investment isn't there, then people start to invent games in their heads, and then you get, you know, No Man's Sky and a lot of other very similar games where, you know, people feel like the marketing is overpromised and underdelivered. But I don't know, in terms of who's done it well, some of the worst I've seen recently, in the recent years, has been Evolve.
Yeah.
Where the marketing has just so utterly destroyed the core concept of that game with just cross-purpose deals and DLC packs, and who knows what the fuck you were getting when you were buying that game, you know, how many people, you know, who was included, who wasn't, what the hell you even did with these characters, who they were. I mean, that was just absolutely abysmal. It was really hard to penetrate as press, let alone if you're a fucking customer.
Yeah.
There's that marketing phrase of being on message. They were on like 12 different messages and neither of the messages were
what the hell it was.
In the same language. It was so odd.
In terms of good examples, like one of the best I've encountered was actually Overwatch. When Blizzard revealed Overwatch, they just came out, the game was basically ready and you could play it straight away, and they were just very clear about what it was. They couldn't say whether it was going to be free to play or whatever because they hadn't decided yet. But in terms of, it's a team shooter and these are what the characters are like and here's our vision for it and how we want it to evolve, that was all in place like immediately. And you could play it and they were happy for you to play it and take your impressions outwards because they were confident that it was probably already quite good. Yeah.
It's like the best marketing is often the simplest, but you can only do straightforward marketing if you have a straightforwardly good and appealing thing that you're making.
Yeah.
So, given that, I think one of the reasons we're often so critical of marketing is that marketing is often the art of covering up something severe on multiple flaws. And that is, so if it's doing really well, it's doing something bad. Whereas, I think like my favorite acts of marketing are always the ones that get out of the way and let the game sell itself. Like, my favorite kind of moment, I think I probably talked about this at the time, but my favorite kind of moment in a press trip in the 5 years I've been doing this was seeing Alien Isolation revealed. And I think Creative Assembly have always had a bit of a coy streak when it comes to marketing. I think like they've done that recently with the Halo Wars game they're making. But they kind of gave us like a 10-minute chat about the original movie and kind of what it meant, and like a sort of like film theory 101 and sci-fi 101 thing, which if you've been a games journalist for any length of time is total alarm bells, because we don't have anything to show. It's like, we're going to show you one piece of concept art and talk at you. And then they were like, well, we're done with this now. All right, off on your own. And then we were just ushered into rooms by ourselves and told to play it for an hour. And, having gone from not expecting to see, you maybe even see it moving, to them having the confidence to put us alone in rooms with the game and have us play it for an hour, was very effective at giving a positive impression of the game, to the extent that is marketing in that context. But that, again, would have completely backfired had the game been bad.
Yeah.
And if the game had been bad or unfinished or unready for that, they would have simply gone back to the same dance that people normally do. So, like, tricky, Blizzard is interesting because I think they've learned a lot about talking to their community, and they've gotten a lot better about being open with their community. But the marketing side of Overwatch is, it is like that dichotomy that you raised at the start is every part of that at once. Like, it is a brute force attempt to ensure that something is a cultural phenomenon by spending a vast amount of money on it. Overwatch didn't kind of earn I don't think it initially earned its kind of, sort of prestige through just quality or originality. It earned it through extremely aggressive marketing and the kind of accumulated brand awareness that has attached itself to Blizzard over decades of marketing for all of their other games, and admittedly the quality of their other games, but it had a head start in life thanks to millions of dollars being a Blizzard game.
Didn't they also position it? I mean, Battleborn's a bad game, but I mean, as in, it's not an enjoyable game by my metrics. But I mean, didn't Overwatch sort of end up as a kind of, hey, by the way, we're releasing this, sort of. I can't remember exactly the way round it was, but I know that the timing certainly favoured Overwatch.
Well, I mean, if we want to talk about, apparently what we're going to talk about, instead of marketing that we have admired, we're going to talk about disaster marketing for hybrid shooters. But, Battleborn's the Randy Pitchford tweet, which I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah,
the tweet.
Show note it because it's pretty spectacular.
Battleborn is meta growth and hobby grade co-op. And 6 other things beside. That was one of the most spectacularly misfired. I mean, the recent thing they did with, so I don't know who did what in this, so I'm just going to air quotes and allegedly around this, but it really looked like they tried to make a Battleborn porn subreddit happen. Do you see this?
Like the battle porn thing.
So, Randy Pitchford tweeted something like, I'm just saying, looks like some people are setting up like a Battleborn porn community on Reddit. Cheeky link over to the not safe for work porn.
Not safe for Reddit. That's some quite.
Yeah, no, it wasn't that bad. Porn subreddit. But then people realized that the subreddit had only been created about 3 hours before he tweeted and had like no members. So how the hell did he know about it?
To be fair, he might have Google Alert set up. I have one for Angela Lansbury.
That's true. So, so there's no guarantee that it had been created as a marketing thing. It definitely backfired.
On the more sort of things that we have liked side of things, I really enjoy reading through people's dev blogs. And so, that's kind of more of a soft marketing or things that people put out there on their own websites, and sort of it's to sort of repeatedly update and engage and all of that kind of stuff. But I do really find it fascinating when somebody's talking about, oh, here's how we did the artwork here, or here's why this particular reward loop works or doesn't work, or, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And sometimes people do sort of guest editorials for places like, what's it called? Gama Sutra and places. And so I do think that kind of stuff is more what I enjoy, and I think that's because there's an honesty to it. It's kind of, you know, it's still ultimately driving people's attention back to the games, and still sort of has often either a positive slant or is about a particular element rather than the game as a whole. And so, you know, but it's a point where you are often sort of confronted by a person or a department's actual enthusiasm and some insight, you know? And I find that really, really interesting. Like we mentioned the seasonal maps and things, and quite recently the League of Legends team put up a blog entry about how they made the snow effect in their, because they redid Summoner's Rift, which is the main competitive 5v5 map, and because they'd sort of done all the artwork by hand, it was going to then be a massive task to actually sort of make seasonal versions of that, because it wasn't just about reskinning something with different tiled textures. And so they were actually explaining about how they'd experimented with different sort of ways of grouping texture, grouping tones and things. And by altering, you know, particular color values within that, you'd end up with like a snow effect, even though it wasn't really. And so it's stuff like that is still, you know, putting forward a particular, I guess, positive version of your game, but it is also coupled with expertise or enthusiasm that is coupled to that game and explains a thing.
I do like the when sort of so a couple of developers recently have used YouTube in inventive ways. I think the Numenera, Tides of Numenera developers did a kind of quest through YouTube where you sort of watch the next video to see the next step of the quest based on your decisions to kind of replicate that. I know they did that for Dishonored 1 and 2, I think. That kind of thing is kind of cool.
Also, some Kickstarter campaigns have had absolutely like stunning, like, you know, the pitch bit. Knights and Bikes had an amazing section of just, you know, they infused the whole thing with like this very particular tone that they are clearly going for in the game itself. That kind of enthusiastic, sort of lo-fi kind of 80s kids movie kind of attitude. And so there were like, you know, little illustrations and GIFs, and the whole thing just sort of fizzed with energy. And I thought that was really cool, because I was happy to just write about, you know, a Kickstarter done well, in that it was interesting to me that how they had achieved that, being personable in what is essentially a funding pitch.
Kane writes, what is the worst keybinding mistake of all time, and why is it Bethesda's decision to put melee attack and throw Molotov cocktail on a single key in Fallout 4?
That seems really dumb.
Yeah, that is pretty dumb.
I had a thing, because after I talked about how I didn't think I'd ever played Deus Ex, it turns out I have played a bit of Human Revolution, and I think I played like the first mission. I didn't get any further than that because I think I got bored and then forgot it existed. But it's that one where you have to defuse a bomb, I think. Yes,
the gas bomb in the first mission.
Yeah, I think so. And I was playing it with my control pad because, you know, and what happened was I couldn't remember what unequip was. And so both times I tried different buttons, just trying to remember what that was, because people were getting antsy with me, brandishing whatever it was in their faces. And in one instance, I think I punched someone in the face or performed a brutal takedown or something. Yeah, that was one thing that happened when I was trying to diffuse the situation, is I kind of made it worse and then took someone down in a really brutal way. And the other thing that happened was I tried to unequip, but instead I pressed the button, I think it was the right bumper, and that throws like one of those concussive mines or whatever it is. And because we were standing really near the bomb, that went off, and then it triggered the bomb, and then everyone died.
Right. Good
so,
job.
Yeah, that was not my finest hour. But also, I still don't know what the unequip button was. So,
I have a terrible time with controllers that bind crouch to clicking in one of the sticks. Because whenever I'm scared or stressed, I crush my controller with my tiny hands, and immediately, like, so if something frightening happens, my character sort of crouches down, almost as though they're going to fetal position.
That's quite appropriate.
Which is quite appropriate, but fucking annoying, because I can't actually deal with anything.
Isn't it usually like to run? Because I always find that, like, if I click in, I'm expecting to run fast.
Yeah, sometimes it is, but sometimes it isn't. If it's run, that's good. I can handle that, but if it's crouch, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
You're willing to clench to sprint, but not clench to crouch.
Absolutely, yeah. Whatever, if my fear response gets me out of the scary situation, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you want fight or flight. You don't want, like,
fight
crunch.
and then just be in the way of danger until death.
Don't want fall. Yeah.
Yeah. Fight or fall.
I could think of one, really. I've had lots of embarrassing control scheme mishaps, but they're really my fault rather than the game.
There's some bad ones. There's the old Metal Gear games where they had like PlayStation 2 pads and they had like pressure sensitive keys. So if you lightly press X and Snake would, hold them in a chokehold. If you pressed it too hard, it would slit their throat or something or choke them out. And it's just like, I don't know how the hell hard you want me to push this button to not kill this man. So it's totally random what would happen.
Yeah.
Stephen's Sausage Roll also does this irritating thing where you use the, I think it's that you use the arrow keys, but like forwards and backwards in the direction that you are facing, but left and right, they don't strafe, they make you turn clockwise. So I think it's more that it's relational rather than anything else. And so I can't remember the exact problem that I was encountering, but it was something that happened sufficiently often and my brain never quite got used to it that I would end up needing to restart sections or go back or whatever, because it was like, oh, well, I guess I've now got myself into an impossible situation because I forgot.
I do think none of these are possibly as dumb as melee attack and throw Molotov cocktail being the same.
No, I don't recall that being the case. But
I don't know how context sensitive that is. Because if it is context sensitive, then I think that's probably reasonable. Because what is a Molotov cocktail but a punch far away?
Yeah, with fire.
Yeah, exactly. I don't really agree with that now that I've said it. But I said it, so let's move on. Jonathan writes, "Hey CNC, just to reminisce about Time Commanders a bit more, there was one really interesting aspect to the original series." So this, for clarity, if you didn't listen to a previous episode, is the BBC's now renewed historical warfare game show series that runs off Total War, basically. Yes. It ran from September 2003 to March 2005, whereas Rome Total War launched in September 2004. So the entire first series existed for a year before Rome even launched. Creative Assembly provided a special build of their tactical engine for use in the series, but because of BBC rules, they were not allowed to say what game it was, for that would be essentially advertising. So you can imagine watching the show as a fan of the sprite-based Total Wars and thinking, oh my god, what's this? I must have this game. Then scanning the credits trying to find out what it was. Software provided by Creative Assembly. I don't think I'd even seen magazine previews for Rome at this point, and it would be a year before anyone could buy it. After a rocky launch and a patch or two, it turned out to be the most beloved Total War game, and for a while you could only see it on a BBC TV show. Is this a question? Regards, Jonathan. It's not a question, but it is interesting.
Interesting, yeah.
Kind of a mad thing that happened. Talking about marketing.
Yeah.
It's both spectacular, like, it is the most spectacular kind of inclusion of a product in a kind of mainstream piece of entertainment you can think of. And then you have the BBC specific stipulation, you know, tell people what it is. Which that might be a really alien concept if you're not British. I actually wonder if, because I don't believe there's any American channel that has a complete prohibition on showing a product.
Yeah, the BBC struggle with this. Having to actually, film reality a lot of the time. Very careful.
Well, it's definitely a challenge that will hit as they do esports. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, goodness me.
It's just a funny thing. But yeah, there's no other circumstance I can think of where a barely announced revolutionary sequel to a new game has just been quietly on television
for a year. What a scoop right there on national television.
Right, it was going to turn out that, I don't know, Greg Wallace is Half-Life 3 and he's just been there on television.
God, I hope not.
All this time.
Awful.
I don't know why I chose Greg Wallace.
Dark future.
Yeah. We live in a dark future, Tom.
Oh, no, we do actually. Forgot that.
Nothing's off the table now.
No.
In terms of what
could happen.
Indeed. But no, thank you for your email. That is interesting. Oscar writes, "Hi podcast.
Hello.
I really think Pip as chaotic neutral makes the most sense. Because Sarah is chaotic neutral, and that's who Pip would be if she were a Dragon Age character. Definitely chaotic and mostly good, because she's concerned with fighting for the downtrodden, but also a bit evil because of pranks. There's no question. Cheerio."
Are there lots of pranks in Dragon Age 2?
It's Dragon Age Inquisition, this is, not 2. It's a pretty pranks and bants heavy game.
Like, what kind of pranks are we talking about? Is it buckets of water on the top of doors? Or
it's not really like pranks you see. It's written into the dialogue, so it's stuff that's happened when you've been away from the base for a while and you hear about it. That kind of thing. I can't remember off the top of my head. There's a lot of bants. There's a lot of pranks-related bants.
I really don't remember bants.
Really? You only played the first couple of hours of Dragon Age 1 though.
Yeah, it was very much swampy.
Yeah, there was some light bant, but
there was swamp, and there was also a really terrible thing that happened to one of the characters in my acquaintance really early on.
Yeah, there's some terrible stuff. But when you settle into your relationships with characters, there's quite a lot of bants in Dragon Age. It's any story. It has its serious moments. It has its
the experience lost, and they have to learn to bant again.
Yeah, exactly.
That takes time.
You have to bant together. In this moment of crisis. There's a lot of bants.
I see.
Yeah, I can sort of see that. For a while, when I was playing Dragon Age, there's a character that reminded me of you and now completely no longer does. Because, she's a friendly team player.
Yeah, that's not really any of my skill sets.
No.
Is it?
No. So yes, thank you for your contribution to the is Pip evil or not debate.
Thank you.
We haven't fully resolved that yet, but...
So neutral is just maybe.
Yeah.
It's just normal, isn't it?
Chaotic neutral, so lawful neutral is perpetually maybe.
Right.
In the words of Oasis.
That's not how that song goes.
No. But chaotic neutral means that you end up neutral because you are sometimes good and sometimes evil.
Okay, that's more interesting.
If that makes sense as a distinction.
You just even out. It's fine. You give some money to charity, you kick someone.
Yeah.
Right.
That is...
Okay.
Yeah, we're kind of zooming in on... We've located Pip.
Make some buns, have a tantrum.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
yeah.
Good.
Brian writes... Recently, I found myself really wanting to get into Rainbow Six Siege, but I find the idea that I'll need to interact with other humans completely anxiety-inducing, and the thought drives me away. It's not that I have a problem interacting with other humans, more so that I have a problem more so that when I game, I simply want to be solitary. I spend most of my day interacting with my users, I'm a sysadmin, and upon going home I want nothing more than to shut people out and have them leave me alone. I have a friend with whom I work closely, and he's always gaming with friends and consistently invites me to play Siege or Heroes of the Storm, but I always bow out as I'd rather be left alone. Part of the reason for this, I believe, is the fact that I like to go at my own pace. In my day-to-day life, I find myself needing to acquiesce to the demands and needs of other humans. When I sit down to game, I simply want to go at my own pace and take my time to explore or take in the world. My question is this. What is your gaming style? Would you prefer to go it alone so that you can go at your own pace? Or would you like to game with others? Is there something wrong with me? That as soon as I am informed that a game is primarily co-op, my interest drops to 0? Thanks. Brian.
So I have a solution to Brian's problem, which is that he play Rainbow Six Siege with the people for whom he is being a systems admin. Because, if he's going to be multiplayering at work, in terms of concepts and interactions, maybe he could get them involved in playing some Rainbow Six Siege.
Yeah, I think the question was, can I play this at home? Because I assume he's busy during his work hours.
Well, now you're just being difficult. I've come up with a perfectly good solution.
Well, play Rainbow Six Siege while you're at work instead of doing your job.
Yeah.
Okay.
When you're in the more social frame of mind.
Okay, yeah, no, that's, I see, I do see where you're going with that.
It seems like he has a connection with gaming being quite just a solitary, meditative, explorative experience.
Some people play Heroes of the Storm like that. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. You can play Rainbow Six Siege with bots as well, I think. That's the thing. It's not really the whole experience.
I see what he means. Yeah, no, I do agree. And I'm not a huge fan of competitive games anymore, really, very much. But I enjoy co-op, but sometimes have turned down co-op in invitations when I've been enjoying a single player experience or in a more solitary frame of mind. So it's interesting how your mood affects the type of games that you enjoy at any point.
It's settled to me in that I play a lot of multiplayer games and I like them, but they make me sad sometimes. And I still love single player RPGs, so I don't play as many of them as I used to simply because of time. But I still love being immersed in a single player game and being able to be solitarily immersed in something like that.
Yeah.
But somewhere between those two totally opposed extremes is co-op, and I don't like co-op.
I really like co-op.
And, and so that's, and for me that's because if I'm in a world and being told a story, I don't want someone else there.
Well, I don't like co-op with you.
No.
You're awful. You get weirdly competitive in co-op.
No, I don't.
You do. Like when we were playing Diablo 3 and you were just like, come on, over here. Like, let's go. Let's do this quickly. Like, why haven't you sorted out your inventory yet? I'm just like, because I've never played this before and I'm enjoying the world. And you're just like, yeah, but it's over here. Come here. It's like, oh.
Diablo's a very frustrating game if you don't have exactly the same playstyle as the person you're playing with.
Yeah, that's a kind of a design flaw with Diablo, I would say, actually, that everyone has to be going at the same pace and have the same amount of inventory in their, stuff in their inventory at all times in order to avoid friction. So it feels like that's the thing that could be solved about Diablo, actually, if they're going to
But this happened again with, what was it, like Pillars of Eternity or whatever the thing was that we were playing?
Divinity.
Yeah, Divinity. Right?
Yeah.
Because you had played that before as well, and then you were just like, come over here, where are you going? What are you doing? Oh, okay, well, if you want to go to the inn, we can go to the inn, but that's not where we're supposed to be going. Have you been paying attention?
It's quite a slow, text-heavy RPG, though, Divinity. It feels like an odd fit for co-op. I know some people love it. But
it didn't work for me at all.
For Portal 2 and stuff like that, where the kind of the japes are built into the tone of the experience, or stuff like Left 4 Dead. Where, the competition there between you and the AI, like the AI director actually trying to...
Yeah, I suppose I love Destiny raids, and that's a big form of co-op. That's something I did love.
True.
But yeah, this is, I don't like anything where you lose the story if one player decides to just run ahead.
Yeah.
Cause I just...
Because there you go.
Also, because a lot of these games, the immersion is important to me, and if that is not something that you share completely with your pal, then...
Yeah.
But isn't it exactly like going for a walk with me? Because I've stopped to look at something and you're just like, oh, for God's sake, can we not just go?
That's an excellent point.
Which I suppose maybe you don't want to replicate in a game. Fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like co-op, and that's why I like things like Dota or things like Paladins, or when I did play Overwatch, is because I was happy to be on the same team as my friends, but then I kind of take on their mood as well. So if one person is desperately having an awful time, then that means that I can't not notice that and not sort of try and either cheer them up or, it gets a bit weird, like, so everyone kind of needs to be in the same headspace, otherwise it sort of falls apart.
Yeah.
So, what was the question?
What our style of approach to this was. So I think we've,
I think I'll play a bit of everything.
I certainly found that my style has changed, as I need to be able to account for my gaming time a bit more accurately and almost justify it a little bit more. I find myself spending far less time playing games for myself, because it's not doubling up as anything other than purely escapist entertainment for me, which is valuable, but loses its value, I think, over time, or it becomes harder to justify. Javier writes, Dear Creighton Crowbar, I have a short and sweet question. You mentioned that the expectations for a new Half-Life game delivering on the quality of narrative seen so far makes no sense and is likely, but don't you think their silence revolves instead out of a lack of an engine? In the olden days, sequels were like new consoles for PC gamers. A new Quake, Unreal, CryEngine or Source means a new generation of games. Do you think that maybe several failed attempts at a groundbreaking new Source engine is the biggest impediment, in turn causing them to restart Half-Life 3 every few years over the last 12? I think the answer is yes. Well, at least in part, yes.
Haven't they said that they're doubling down around Source 2, though?
Yeah.
Like, as part of the AMA?
Yeah, so the AMA is the thing I think we should
so
into here.
When we did the last pod, it was hours before the AMA happened. And as predicted, not much was revealed at all. But Gabe Newell did say that they look at new technology when they're looking at ways to kind of to go and ways to where to put their time into new games. And that new technology for them, what seems to be exciting at the moment is VR. I'm not sure that, and Source 2 seems to be like a necessity. It seems to do things that previous Source
it's an
couldn't.
incremental improvement over Source 1. It's not
and it feels like, it does a lot of networking stuff and kind of behind the scenes stuff that is much better for them if they're trying to sustain games like Dota 2 on this huge scale. But it's not necessarily the kind of fidelity leap that you'd see with the last edition of Source when they were demoing Half-Life 2 and it was physics was new, before proper physics was in games. So that type of leap again is probably what's going to be required to excite Valve to look into creating a new game. It sounds like that VR is that for them at the moment.
So maybe it's more the because for me I feel a bit like there just hasn't been the idea. Like, they're the sort of company where they would probably happily say, yeah, sure, work on that for a while and see where you get with it if somebody comes up with a decent idea, or at least the inklings of an idea. And then if it doesn't really go anywhere, or if they can't make it work, or, if they need people on a different project, then they're sort of also happy to just say, meh, let's leave that one for a while, or, I don't think it's working, or whatever. And because they haven't announced anything, then, nothing really lost. But maybe, as you're saying, like, if they did have a new thing that they wanted to showcase, a new, engine, or a new sort of, entirely new sort of concept of technology that they wanted to, maybe it would suddenly rocket up the list of priorities. It's just that at the moment it feels like a thing that would be nice if they could come up with a way of making it amazing, but otherwise, they've got other things that they specifically are interested in doing.
I think it's worth not underestimating the fact that it's a lot more difficult for studios now to escalate with a game engine in the way that was possible in the 90s and early noughties. I agree with the idea that we had those big generational shifts that surrounded the release of particularly a new first-person shooter, because that was the genre driving all of that technological innovation. But that's simply not the case now.
Yeah.
And incremental improvement is the rule. And VR represents probably one of the biggest leaps forward, but it's situational and patchy and not available to everybody. And it's not as simple as slapping a new graphics card in and suddenly seeing something you've never seen before, like a seesaw. It's...
total conceptual shift in what games could be, basically, which is quite exciting, but
possibly even too far the other way.
Yeah,
what Half-Life would want to be.
Yeah,
I guess I look at Valve, as the sort of, as we've said before, this Obsidian mind cube that doesn't really give much away generally, and so all I can like my impression, I don't know where it necessarily comes from half the time, given that. So it's probably based on just little things and an assumption of what I would do in that situation. So I just don't necessarily think that Half-Life 3 is potentially that exciting to the people who would be working on it.
Yeah, I agree.
And so they've got other things that they want to do. And as part of the AMA, like Gabe Newell said about, you know, the different technologies that people were sort of experimenting with, the VR stuff was kind of interest, obviously. And, but also just that that other people's focuses. I think he specifically mentioned that he was interested in computer brain interactions and things like that. And so that feels very much like they have things that they're super interested in and will happily research and things. But I can't necessarily imagine that the third game in a series that people just sort of won't let go is necessarily the most exciting thing for them.
If they're going to do this kind of technological leap, it would be weirdly backward looking to do Half-Life, wouldn't it? And if they're going to do this kind of...
Also, it's a no-win situation, Half-Life,
Yeah, sure.
as far as I can see at the moment. Like, if you announce anything, it's never going to make many people happy.
No.
So...
Unless it's great, in which case...
Maybe.
Yeah, I think it's a free win for them, but I understand why they wouldn't go for it.
I don't. I think it's a massive trap.
The reason I disagree is I think a lot of people would be happy with a solid shooter from them built on the principles of Half-Life 2, honestly. I think the mistake they made was not finishing their promised trilogy of episodes, because they stuck it out with Half-Life Episode 1 and 2, they promised Episode 3, they teased Episode 3, and then they just didn't do it. And because that was still under the Half-Life 2 header, there was no expectation with Half-Life 2 Episode 3 that it would need to be this groundbreaking thing. I think they shot themselves in the foot by not releasing that, and therefore ending their trilogy halfway through.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely informed the way they talk to people. That's definitely the reason why they never say anything now, because they just they want to avoid disappointing people. Like when Gabe said that, I did completely buy that. They just don't want to say, oh, we're working on this, in case people get really invested in it and they disappoint people over and over again. Better to be this kind of ominous cube than sometimes, so occasionally a piece of technology or a game pops out of it.
Yeah. I mean, I totally get that. I do totally get that. But I think sometimes when people talk about the Half-Life 3 thing, they forget that people only started asking for Half-Life 3 after they got bored of asking for Episode 3. And that, they assumed that too much time had passed to finish the episodic thing they were definitely doing.
So it must be a genre-shattering sequel of some description.
Exactly.
Which is
game
over at that point.
Yeah, but I think they've definitely left it too long to do Episode 3 now. A Half-Life 2 engine, decent shooter.
I don't know, you could chuck that one out. It'd be fine.
Honest to God, that's not the worst idea in the world, I think. Because the reason people are upset is primarily because they were promised a trio of episodes. They got 2 of them. It ended on a cliffhanger. There's still a shit and avoidable thing, ultimately. Anyway, Henry writes, Dear Commanders and Conquerors, I would love to play the latest Hitman game, but I'm afraid I'll struggle with it just as I did with Blood Money. Back then, I couldn't even finish the demo because I simply couldn't use the piano wire to strangle my targets. You had to be positioned in the exact right spot and hit the button in the exact right moment to do so. And most players didn't seem to have any issue with it, but I would stand right behind an unsuspecting guard, desperately hitting the strangle key over and over again without success. I managed to do it a few times, but not reliably enough to play the game, so I gave up feeling quite stupid. This leads me to my question. Did you ever have to quit playing a game just because you couldn't master its controls for some reason? Thanks for reading, and please keep casting those pods forever. Henry. So,
I had to stop playing Thumper because... or I did it first, and then it was only when I went back to it that I got the hang of it, and that's because... when it's teaching you, it doesn't really explain what it's doing. It's a series of cues, and it tells you a little bit, but you're sort of intuiting it. And some reason I had thought that in order to, I think, maybe execute a turn or something, you had to keep the button held down, but you just had to tap it. And because I was keeping it held down for what I thought was the right duration, it kept doing slightly odd things. And so I would miss turns because it wouldn't register as a tap sometimes, but sometimes it would because I would happen to release it at the right time for something else, I think. And so I just got so fed up of what felt like a random fail when I went round a corner that I couldn't understand, because I thought, oh, well, maybe it requires, some kind of, millisecond specific timing, and I'm just not getting it. And then it turned out, oh, you just don't hold space down. Well, fine. But it was only when I went back to it after that and, fiddled around again that I managed to clear the other thing out of my head. And so if I hadn't tried it again, I would never have got to grips with that, and I would have just walked away thinking that game had really weird, unreliable controls.
Yeah, I think, I actually agree. I always really struggled to get into the original Hitman games because the controls were so obtuse. And New Hitman is obtuse, but I do think they made one change that makes a vast difference. Because I used to have this problem generally with old games. There was definitely, back in the day, along with there being an acceptance that sometimes PC games just wouldn't fucking work, there was also an acceptance that control schemes would be weird and you would need a printed out sheet of key bindings for each new game just to understand how to interact with it. Some standardized control schemes have helped with that, but so have a willingness from sort of UI designers basically to give you prompts for what will happen when you press a button. And the new Hitman is particularly good at this, because as you're walking around, it pops up to tell you what will happen if you press E now, and what will happen if you press X now, and all the rest of that. And it'll even give you a little bit more contextual information, there's a difference between walking up to push someone if you'll just push them over or, into something, like a pile of bins. Not that you can do that, but you know what I mean? And if you are going to push them off a ledge, it'll clarify, it'll say eliminate under the push. So it'll just give that qualifier to the action, which means that when you press the button, you don't end up in that situation we were talking about earlier about having it spiral out of control because you didn't know what the buttons would do. It tells you exactly what will happen when you push the button, before you push it. And what that means is that when, that whole thing about getting into position and then finding that the garrote button doesn't work can't really happen because you're not in position if that prompt hasn't shown up.
Yeah.
So I'd actually encourage Henry to try Hitman, the new one, if that was his problem with the old one, because even though the controls are still a little bit fiddly, that extra layer of clarity means that you don't end up in that situation, I think. So yeah.
Cool.
It's a good gam.
Yeah, I like it.
Damien writes, G'day from Australia. I went back to Elite Dangerous after Chris described the recent changes going on in its universe. Wanting to do some trading, I did a Google for trading advice and found the database search tool, which not only showed me the prices of wares in any system, but also tell me the ideal location to buy and then sell any ware for maximum profit within a limited radius of my current system. I debated whether or not I should use this tool to cash in, or if it was too exploitative. I would not have had this internal debate if this tool was within the game itself made available by the developer. What is the best community-made tool that you've used for a game? Was this tool so essential or enhancing that it would have really been that it really should have been the developer which included it within the game in the first place? Cheers, Damien. So, that is an interesting debate because, there is also, because it is a fine line. There's an iPad app that I tried but don't like, that is I think it's produced by Rocket, which allows you to sync your tablet to your PC and create custom control schemes on the tablet. And that's actually pretty sweet if you're kind of running like a simulator setup, because you can literally surround yourself with touch screens that activate ship functions.
That's pretty rad.
With custom UI and stuff. And that's pretty cool. I find it a bit janky and uncomfortable when you're just sitting at your PC normally, and not really necessary, but that is fine, but it's not something that it doesn't give you an advantage, but it's not something that you would expect Frontier to have included. Although it'd be cool if they did. But yeah, something that gives you a straight up advantage with no downside is a really tricky thing to reconcile, I think.
I think sometimes I've looked up things like in Sunless Sea, I looked up, trade rates and things, so for buying and selling, and that was simply because I felt like if I was a captain in this game, I would have made notes of these things as we went round. It's just that because there was no sort of note-making ability in the game, I hadn't. And so I figured that as it didn't interfere with my immersion in the game, that I had that information to hand, and it didn't feel like cheating, and it didn't feel like it was breaking anything. It felt more like the internet was sort of filling in a system which should have been part of the game or was left out for expediency, but wasn't a thing that I felt I should be without necessarily.
Sounds like you also, the questioner is just skipping a system they didn't want to interact with, which is fine, maybe. It's a way of defining your own difficulty, isn't it? And improving the flow of the game for yourself.
Like, I feel like when a lot of these things also do end up in the game one way or another. Like, I don't know if this will necessarily, but there'd be no harm in it, because again, it allows players to determine their own difficulty. Like, I think maybe developers sometimes look at the tools that people are developing around in game and use that as guidance to what's actually important to people or what people are finding boring. Like, if someone is searching out a tool to play a game in a certain way, then chances are maybe that's just the way the game should be. Like, you know, in the latest Dota UI overhaul, not the latest one, but one of the most recent ones, they incorporated loads of things that had previously been only, like, loads of data and stats and things about games that you could only previously find in stat tracking websites that pulled things from the API. The example I think we would all go back to for this is Destiny, which has a really interesting series of things that you can do with the API for that game, where Bungie maintain a website and all of your character information, your profile, your vault full of items, all of that stuff is available online. And with a browser, you can move things between your vault and your character and back again and whatever without having to return to town on the fly. So if you have a computer next to you, you can, you know, and you are in the middle of a raid and you need something from your vault and you don't want to quit out, you can just parachute it in as long as you've got the space to do so. But that requires a browser, and that was obviously something that people wanted access to, but not everyone has a personal computer right next to wherever they play their console games. So, you know, apps were inevitable, and initially the Bungie app was pretty bad and didn't give you all the functionality that you wanted. And so the kind of the third party apps arrived, and they were a lot better. And then they started to incorporate other functionality that had been developed separately to that, like event timers to help you find the public events, so you didn't have to hang around too much on planets waiting for a specific public event to spawn. You'd be told what was likely to happen in the next 10 minutes. And so these little sort of packages of tools came that enhanced the experience of play with no downsides really for anybody. And then Bungie improved their own stuff, and that, you know, eventually sort of fed back into, you know, and that's sort of an accepted part of the game that you can, you know, you go back to town to get stuff out of the vault, but only if for whatever reason you don't have your phone on you.
I think there's also the idea that the developers will give you tools that hopefully will push you towards playing the game in the way that they want you to play it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the way you want to play it is bad if it diverges from that. For example, I can imagine that Bungie kind of wanted people to sort of be surprised by these events when they happened in World, and they also probably wanted you to perhaps use them for earning, you know, upgrades on weapons and things like that, but over time. But people don't necessarily have that time, or, you know, that time would have been longer than their enjoyment of the game without those extra sort of apps and the event timers and things. And so it's not necessarily in Bungie's interest for the player to stick with their vision of it.
Yeah.
You know?
Actually, in interesting inverse of that, but I think reliant on the same logic, is it also doesn't make sense for Bungie to release an official public event timer tool. Because like the first time I saw a public event in Destiny, it blew my mind because I didn't realize. Now I know that game inside out because I played it so much. I know when in what you would think of as the single player missions, it briefly phases you into a multiplayer instance and out again seamlessly. And those public events could happen in any form of a multiplayer instance, including the ones that are sandwiched in the middle of single player. So I thought I was playing single player, and then suddenly a satellite falls out of orbit, and then I'm defending it with other players, and they've sort of all seamlessly come in. But then I go into the next area of my single player bit, and those players just go away, and I'm left on my own again. That's a brilliant trick. It would have been spoiled for me if there was a part of the interface I could have uncovered that said, next public event in Plaguelands due in 2 minutes. So, but that said, after, fast forward a couple of 100 hours, and I am mega familiar with the game systems. I know exactly how it works, and I know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a particular Warsat public event. At that point, I would probably get bored if they made me wait.
Yeah.
So at that point, the fact that there are third-party apps is great. And it means that kind of you can have both in a way, because you have the surprise factor and the kind of magic trick for that first generation of players, because the game conceals that information. But then the third party is there to prop up players that have invested heavily and for whom the surprise is now meaningless.
That's the thing. It's kind of the ideal solution, because if you're invested enough to care that much, you will find the third party apps anyway. And this happens to me with Guild Wars 2 as well, where they've got these fantastic kind of public event quest chains that will culminate in just a enormous, incredible kind of boss fight in the middle of an open world area. And eventually you're just looking for timers for those. But I would never want that in the game, because it would have destroyed the first time I saw a dragon just land somewhere and like 20 players are there. I don't know why they're there, just waiting for this dragon. And just that moment, it's like, it's worth the hassle of going to third parties to preserve that initial mystery and kind of mystique. So it's an interesting one. It's kind of a form of, I wouldn't call it cheating, of just kind of streamlining the game for yourself once you've kind of gained a certain level of expertise with it.
I think that's the thing, is that what the game ships with and the stuff that is officially developed is the developer's statement of intent, and is sort of taken as a kind of guide for how to play the game. And so if you include ways to make it entirely about systems and totally strip out the story or the sense of wonder, then that is taken as a kind of thing that the developers are then responsible for. Whereas if you have to seek it out and then make that part of your experience, that's fine, but it's a decision that you've taken and they haven't sort of pushed you towards or made part of what they've done and, risked, I guess, cheapening some of the narrative bits or some of the exploration bits.
You see it with stuff like raid UIs for World of Warcraft and stuff, where the third party stuff was so good that Blizzard just ended up emulating it wholesale, and then other companies have copied Blizzard. So raid UIs are now just kind of a weird amalgamation of stuff that various communities have come up with and that developers have responded to. So you get these interesting pieces of hybrid audience dev design that persist today.
Yeah, that is super interesting, actually,
Yeah.
watching that stuff kind of fold in. But I don't think you should feel bad about getting your trade data from Google, because God knows I do. And actually, that kind of brings us neatly to our next question, which is also about the value of your time. Iray, I think I'm pronouncing that right, says, I'm currently playing through Pillars of Eternity as I found myself with a reasonable amount of time while job hunting. However, while working, I can never find the time necessary to truly enjoy a 60-plus hour RPG. Do you have any recommendations for condensed RPG experiences that will scratch my D&D itch without leaving me a tired husk of a man? Or is the satisfaction linked too heavily to the timescales and scope of these games to ever be reduced to a more manageable size? All the best, Iray.
Those games are super, super long.
Yeah.
I wish they weren't. I love Pillars of Eternity, but wow, that game is huge.
Yeah.
So I almost don't have a hope of finishing it for the reasons the questioner describes. It's just too much. I think it's not necessarily D&D, but I love the Mass Effect games for being relatively concise.
Yeah. 40 hours rather than hundreds.
But yeah, which is still a lot, but
Yeah. I think we mentioned it earlier, Banner Saga is a decent fit for this, because
for sure.
It's decently long, but it's not infinite. And it's
chunked
also,
as well.
I think crucially, it feels kind of episodic. It's a linear tale in some ways, even though your choices do matter. And that means that it's not like an intimidating open world that you can get totally lost in. It's,
Yeah. Really cool game.
You can dip in and out.
Might be worth seeing if there's any RPG type stuff on tablet or whatever, because tablet and mobile in general sort of tend to be viewed as more things that people can play in smaller chunks of time. So that might be a an area in which to start having a little look.
Yeah. I suggest Darkest Dungeon as well. That's a good,
that's good.
sort of pint-sized dungeon exploring game that you can dip in out of. I think sometimes the key isn't length so much as the ability to like put it down and pick it back up again and keep
definitely.
playing a little bit more and enjoy it.
Definitely. Yeah, that's definitely the problem with something like Pillars of Eternity, where if I went back into that game now,
I put it down and
completely lost.
Yeah.
No idea where I am or what my party's built to do.
Yeah, because I'm excited about Torment, Tides of Numenera, which is out pretty soon. But I know that when that comes out, I need to put the time aside because like I need to play it, and it's like I'm invested in that setting, and I love that type of RPG and that kind of writing, so I should play it. But I know that even if I love it, I'll walk away from it and not be able to reconnect with it. So yeah.
Yeah, the last time I tried to play Baldur's Gate 2, which is a game that I've enjoyed very much, but repeatedly had the same problem with. I think there's actually like a journal writing function within the game that I tried to use to write journals. But it just dissolved into madness. Like it was just trying to record the stat builds of what I was trying to do with various characters alongside trying to, keep pace with all the narrative stuff. And it just doesn't work. Like I was considering with the next big RPG, just leaving myself like an audio diary, just recording myself talking about like, what the hell?
Will we ever find this? And you'll have scrawled, like turned back on the wall of your flat in jam.
That's
we'll
right.
find you just like slumped with the tape recorder next to you.
Or you could leave the dictaphones around the office and so have that be like one of the collectibles in the open world adventure that is
Tom
PC
Senior disappeared
Gamer.
6 months ago. Discover what the fuck happened to him.
It would be like
Played
in
a
The
lot of
Witness,
It's played far too much Pillars. But it's like you're just sitting there with a dictaphone, just kind of like saying, here's Jake, he's a tank, he's got this, these are his skills, this is how you use him. He synergizes with Jane. She's really good at magic, and, this is how they interact. Also, you're on a quest to save the world. These 3 quests are at midpoint. This one's important. Just kind of leaving myself an audio kind of log of every fucking thing I need to know about.
You end up more like Dale Cooper in Twin Peaks at this point.
That'd be
it's
amazing.
like Diane. Like, all right, I need 3 more goblin skulls, and it's not the guy you think. It's the blacksmith in the other town with the tree. He wants that for a jerkin.
And the kobolds here are excellent. I might do this, actually. This sounds like a funny feature.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this with Numenera. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, well,
Nice.
I'm trying to think of a Twin Peaks.
Well, Virginia
RPG.
or something.
Yeah. Okay, that is, I guess the answer to that question is play a big RPG, but while role playing Agent Dale Cooper from Twin Peaks. That is
Brilliant answer we came up with.
yeah, great.
And a feature. Yay!
Yeah, hooray.
Hey, good meeting, everybody. That's what we were doing. I don't know.
Any other business?
No, that is all of the questions we've got time for. If you'd like to send us a question for a future episode, you can do so by emailing us questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You can also tweet us at crateandcrowbar. You can hang out on our Discord channel with our community. The link for our Discord channel is on the top bar of our website at crateandcrowbar.com. And I've asked about short URLs and don't know yet. We'll find out. We'll figure something out. But anyway, it's a button on our website. You can push that. You can do anything. If you would like to follow us individually, I'm C Thurston on Twitter. That's CTHURSTEN. Tom is
At PCG Ludo, which is LUDO.
I'm at Philippa War. Sorry, I was just totally looking in the other direction and wondering why you don't ever spell the PCG part, but then it's letters.
Self-evident, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's all there.
So
he doesn't spell the Ludo part.
No, but he does.
Oh, he does, doesn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, you see. Right.
Right. Sorry. Yes. Go on.
Anyway, so I'm at PHILIPPAWARR.
That spells Philippa War.
Yes.
So
My sister does that.
what?
The counting my name on her fingers, I think. I heard her doing it over the phone when she was working out my email address. And she had to do the same, like,
It's a complicated name.
weird pausing
There's a lot of
and
Ps.
finger, like, counting.
Also, we have, well, I guess we should just say Crate and Crow is now supported by Patreon again. We haven't actually started charging our backers yet. We're not going to do so until
You should get on that.
well, no, the plan we have stated is that we are
No,
going
I
to start,
know.
we're going to start doing so at the in the first podcast in February. And the way Patreon works is it all gets totted up at the end of the month. So we're doing this so that partly we can, gauge what we're going to do. And we've detailed our plans before on the podcast, and it was again on the website, and links in the show notes and so on.
So the next podcast.
Yeah, so the next podcast will be the first one that we tick the little box that means that backers are charged, but nobody is charged until the end of the month anyway, because it's on a per podcast basis. So we're doing this for two reasons. One is so that we can get a sense of, how much support is out there, but also so that anyone who maybe backed the Patreon before and would like to not has ample time to detach themselves. But yeah, so we're running the Patreon again with a view to bringing in more guests to the podcast and making it more sustainable, but also so that we can start thinking about cool spin-off things. The first thing that we're definitely doing is Tom and I, starting next month, will be doing a monthly sort of like hobby and wargaming podcast, which will focus on the stuff that we are personally doing every month. So that'll be like a little bit of my X-Wing stuff and probably a lot of our collective Warhammer projects, the sort of Assorted Games Workshop things, but just sort of a meander around the, our experience with hobby gaming in a given month. But that's only the first of a pretty big range of things we'd like to be able to do with Crate and Crowbar. And so your support is very, very welcome and is incredibly heartening to see. So thank you very much if you're a Patreon backer. And if you'd like to become one, you can do so at patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar, which is where you'll find all of these assorted details. And
just $1.
Just
that
$1.
Would be nice.
Just $1.
That's basically a quid.
Increasingly so. Increasingly so. But yeah, and I promise that in future episodes of the podcast, I will have a shorter Patreon spiel. That's my personal project. And
Let's not make promises we can't stick to.
Indeed. And that is all the podcast we've got time for.
Thanks
for listening.
everybody.